Now that I have the first coat of Petit high build varnish on the interior of the boat, except for the inner keel and the two stringers, I'm going to be doing those later. I'm applying epoxy into the seam almost like a fillet, because there's small cracks and areas that have developed where I have not bedded those, so I want to make sure they're at least sealed from the outside, so that bedding compound, because it's not there, is not necessary, because now I've sealed it. I have to do one more side. Those will get 3 coats of high build Petit varnish, just like the interior. And I will do those last 2 when I get all my wiring done and messing around in here, so if there's any scratches I can fix them for the final look. So today's video is about the interior parts that needed to be refinished and sometimes restored. They included the glove box cover. They include a shelf that goes under the bow. They include a couple pieces of plywood and some shims that the motor shifter sits in. So it's a center shift and power, which is really a cool look. And then the rear seat back, sometimes referred to as the lazy back by Wagemaker. I've removed that and taken it to my work surface so I can repair that, and I'll be showing that to you as well. And then lastly, there were 2 plywood panels in the back, one for the fuel tank and one for the battery. Those needed to be repaired, and those will get epoxy as well. And then I will paint those gray like the interior floor bilge area, so they'll match. So I'll have the gray paint out at the same time. I'll just do all 3 parts at the same time. So time to get to work. One of the things that I have to do when I'm restoring the interior of this boat is to take the fuel tank and battery floors, I guess you'd call them. They sit on top of the stringers to keep abrasion off the bottom of the boat or the hull. And in this case, and I've seen it in many other cases, they're kind of sacrificial in the way of oil and fuel absorption. Yes, there's a little bit of gas and oil in the bottom of the bilge on the bottom near the transom, but there's a lot more on here. So what I usually do is take all the fasteners off to get these, like this has a non-marine screw in it, and then it has a block, which is usually to keep the gas tank from sliding. And then usually there's a strap, and I don't see that. There is a strap on this one, which is where the battery was. So this was a single fuel tank equipped boat. Probably be what it does going forward as well. So what I'll do is I'll take everything apart, make note of the things that need to be replaced. Like you can buy plastic versions of this battery strap. One's missing, in fact, and it'll be a lot better. And then I will go abrade it with 80 grit and see if I can get it down far enough to get the bad wood out that's oil soaked. And if not, I will have to do some treatment. There's different ways you can treat, especially plywood and solid wood. You can get that oil out of there, because otherwise the finish that you put back will not adhere to that. Maybe with epoxy, which this will get, meaning Smith's clear penetrating epoxy sealer, I will soak this in that, and that will prevent this in the future. You probably would seal that, any sort of residual fuel or petroleum in there, but I'm going to try to get it out the best I can. And I mean, worst comes to worst, you make new ones. You try to save this as best I can. If I can, I'll make new ones, and they'll be a lot better going forward. But I'd like to try to save these. These look halfway decent, so I'm going to do that. After I got all of the sanding done, meaning a lot of the loose paint. I even ground down into some of the areas that were indented that were obviously darker, probably where the gas then went down into those because they were the lowest part on the flat surface. I looked up a technique, several techniques about how to get oil and fuel out of plywood and timber that was left open, in this case just as well. It was mineral spirits and baking soda, or mineral spirits and any sort of thing that would not only hold the mineral spirits but then draw up some of the oil, and that was sawdust. So I used mineral spirits and sawdust and made a paste, much like toothpaste, and then I just applied it to the dark areas, and it's been 1 hour, and the mineral spirits have traveled that top veneer. There's probably 5-6 veneers in this plywood. It's marine, but it's only on the top. I can see it down on the sides. So I'm gonna take, like even that, I left that on top to soak it up. I'm just gonna scrape this off and just, you know, get a cloth on there and wipe it down as best I can. And then it said to go ahead and wash it, you know, to get some of the residue, everything off there, and then go ahead and just let it dry. And from what it says is the mineral spirits draws up the petroleum, draws it out of the wood, and then it evaporates. So now I'm allowing it, getting the flour mix off so it can evaporate after I wipe it down. And then I'll do some test patches on this, meaning I'll put some epoxy on it and some paint, see what happens. I've never done this before, so I want to make sure it's right. I'm thinking that once we get the oil drawn up like I did and get it wiped down and then slap the Smith's CPES on it, it should lock it into place. If anything, it won't come up through the paint, but thought I'd give it a good opportunity to get as much as I could out of it and go ahead and, you know, try to make it strong. I know the Smith's is really going to make this plywood durable and strong, and we can leave it in place and not throw it away. I finished sanding the battery and fuel tank floor panels, I'll call them, and I applied the mineral spirits and sawdust recipe over the oil stains to draw out the you know, the petroleum products and anything else in there, and it worked. These are amazingly clean, and they don't smell. So that technique does work. I'm glad I did that. So now I'm gonna give them a new life by putting on some Smith's CPES, clear penetrating epoxy sealer, and I'll do that until they stop absorbing, so until they get shiny, like I did with the boat and spray rails and everything else that gets painted mostly. And I will keep doing that, and then I'll flip them over, and then I'll put them on some little tripods so they don't stick to the plastic. And then when I'm ready to paint, these will be ready to go and super hardy for the next decades of his life. So I have the shelf, I'll call it, that's under the bow. I bought a new mahogany flagpole because it didn't include one when I found the boat. And I'll take that down to natural mahogany, then I'll stain it to match the deck and the rest of the parts. These are the shifter panels. They mount to the inner keel, and then the shifter sits in between, and these are, I'll call these fillers. Got a lot of oil on them. I have to treat with mineral spirits and some soap to get them cleaned up. I'm going to sand those out with 80 grit, carefully and get them ready for stain. You can see the shifter mount has got some delamination, a little bit. It's in an area of the boat that you don't see very often, but I'm going to see if I can source some very thin plywood. This is just one of the layers of the veneer. So I'm hoping I could just make a line here. If I'm able to do that, I'll just make a nice line on both, and then I'll put a strip in there, so it'll blend pretty nicely. Again, we'll see how that goes. If I can figure that out. There's a tiny little chip on this one as well. I probably would just do maybe a kind of an angled chip. It's way up in the bow, you don't even see it, but I'd like to get that fixed. It's delaminated on the edge, so I could come across, or maybe just do a square. We'll figure that out. So I orbital sanded the flat part with 80 grit, and then I hand sanded this with 80 grit. So this is a 2-part shelf, regular, probably exterior plywood that was stained with a piece of mahogany stock that was then nailed. So I will pop these nails out. Looks like they're brass or copper. I will put brand new brass or copper nails in there and run a bead of just wood glue in there, try to give it a little more support. It is kind of floppy, and I think it probably gets a lot of kicking. It's right there where your feet are, and you can throw stuff on it, and stuff probably gets pulled against this upright, so probably be nice to put a little more adhesion in there. And then again, I'll try to do some matching up front if I can find some veneer. If not, so these aren't too bad. Again, they're upright in the cockpit. In the middle is a keelson or a inner keel that these strap to, and then the shifter fits down in between, and then the shifter is then bolted into it. I was working on the shelf that goes under the deck, and it was nailed in, and I wasn't sure what it was. They're ring shank nails, possibly bronze, but they seem to have enough rust on them, or I don't think so. So I am going to reattach this to this. So I'm going to use Titebond 3, which is waterproof. It's a little bit more brown than the Titebond 2, and I'm going to mix in some of this mahogany sawdust that I harvest whenever I can, and fill in the plywood that's delaminated and try to get that so I could save it. The option was to cut it off, but you know, if I had enough wood where I could save it. So I'm going to use a little bit of Titebond that I was going to get rid of anyways. I got the sawdust. I'll make a nice paste, and I'll go in there, and then I'll be able to sand it down and get it pretty even. And then when this goes back on, I will use Titebond again, 3 glue, and then I'll get some bronze ring shank nails, same size, 14 gauge, put it back together. It'll look just like it did back then, and it'll be a lot tighter, and this wood will have stopped breaking. And I'll also, because I'm assuming this is marine ply, but you never know, I'm going to go ahead and soak it in Smith's CPES just to try to give it a little more strength overall, especially on these edges. And then I'll backfill this with Famowood just to kind of make it look good. So I've got my Titebond 3. I'm going to put in a little dust, And the problem is I'm going to have to be very careful that I don't have too much dust or sawdust and screw up the consistency of the glue so that it's too thick and doesn't have any binding power. So that's going to be the goal. So I got a pretty nice looking paste. Again, I'm trying to fill versus adhese, so I think I'm pretty good. And I'm just going to go ahead and fill, like I've got one here on the end. It delaminated. I was thinking, I'm going to have to put in some Famowood, or you can, you know, put a Dutchman in there, but I don't have any plywood of that depth that I think will work. So I'm just going to try to rebuild some of this area where the fasteners are trying to find a place to grab. And then I'll go ahead and have a little bit better place for it to grab. The glue will have a flat surface to adhere to, and try to give this piece of plywood some more life. I just hate to throw away original wood if it has half a chance to survive with just a little bit of application of modern either adhesives or in this case Titebond 3 with some sawdust. So yeah, I'll smooth that out, and then I'll do some end grain filling as well where I can, and then go ahead and let that dry, and then I'll sand it off and go ahead and then reattach once I get those ring shank nails ordered. So I put the under deck bow shelf back together using Titebond 3 in the joint, something a little more traditional. That's what was in there originally. And then on the bottom, I used new bronze ring shank nails, same size, and drove it through the back of the plywood into the original holes. The original holes were fine. And now the ring shank nails are in there holding it. The majority of the strength will be from the glue, not the nails. The nails are in there doing their job, and it gave it that traditional look. And then when that's done, I will do some, maybe even put some plugs into some of these holes that were used way too many times, or it ripped out maybe. Get that fixed, and then choose the holes that I want to use, and then put new bronze fasteners back in when I put it in the boat. Till then, I'll be able to work on my workbench here with a new coat of cherry stain. I'll then seal it, and then several coats of varnish, like some of the other parts, like to the dashboard and to the shifter mount. So that project is done, and I'll let that harden up. This is the back to the second bench seat, and I've always wondered if this was added or purchased later for the boat, and I was never able until recently to even see this seat back in any Wagemaker photos, brochures or anything. I did notice one lately. It was in the front seat. There were, I believe, 2 or 3 bench seats, and this was in the front cockpit. So probably a lower price model, but glad to see that it was something that the Wagemaker boats had. I wasn't sure because of the color, number one, and wasn't even sure this is mahogany, and I don't think it is. I think it's cedar. The other thing that threw me was the fasteners. I was not seeing these types of fasteners on the boat before, especially the acorn nuts in the back. And then I look at and I see old fasteners that had been sent in through the back so that on the front they would be blind and look nice. So finding that photograph of another Wagemaker with the slat type seat back, I'm going to take all the fasteners out and I'm going to take the Famowood out of the back and figure out why this failed. I think it was just not enough stock in the front to hold it. So what I'm going to do is glue it or somehow adhere it so that the fasteners that were originally in here will appear with Famowood over them, and then I'll plug the front or Famowood it just so that they don't show. These the acorn nuts didn't do it, but when these always went down on the bench, they made indentations and then broke the varnish and then the epoxy on the bench. So they've already done enough damage. So I'm going to remove them and the latches and go ahead and buzz this down with a 80 grit. Since it is lumber, I can do that. And I'll get it down to stock and then I'll bring it back up with the cherry stain that I used in the rest of the boat to blend in some of the blemishes and other stock that was covered in epoxy and then had to be taken all the way down to the wood. And it'll match, and we'll have these ugly fasteners out of here, and this won't harm the boat anymore. I've taken apart the second seat back that has hinges, and from what I can tell, smell and feel and look, it looks like cedar, which it's really light. It's certainly not mahogany, it's not oak. I'm glad it's not pine. So what I'm going to do, I've taken it apart because there was way too many fasteners. I think over the years, the original 2 fasteners per slat on each of these connections was not holding. So I think they just kept sending fasteners, new ones in. Eventually they even had bolts that went all the way through. So I understand why they did it. But we can fix this and make it look a lot better. The owner and I concurred that it was too dark for the boat. So what I'm going to do is strip this down and do some testing on the back where the slat will get glued. And I will do some testing to see if the cherry that I put in the rest of the boat is a better match. And I'm sure it will be, but we'll do some testing. And then I will put probably 2 fasteners per slat per upright, so 6 total, and then I'll glue it. So I'll use Titebond 3 to give it that holding power, and then the 6 fasteners per slat, meaning the uprights, will do the better job. And I will go ahead and put Famowood in all of these other fastener holes and just clean it up. And so this is a test one I did. I took the epoxy off, the stain, get it right back down to where I need it to be, and then I'll have some good wood to work with, both with the Famowood. And what I'll do with these uprights went like this. I'm sorry, in the back they did. So what I'm gonna do is put toothpicks, so this will be the front. I'm going to, and this is what I want it to look like. I don't want anything sticking through. Like on a couple of these, they went all the way through. This must have been the middle one, I think it was. Yeah. So what I'm gonna do is these originals on the face will all be stripped, and I will put the screws through in different locations, and I will Famowood these. So that'll be flat again with no surface fasteners, and you'll just see the Famowood where I plugged. And then through the back, where they came, I will put toothpicks in there with Titebond 3 and refill these holes so that the screws have something to grab onto. And that will also fill this hole, which it will be awful deep if I don't put something in there. It's a lot of Famowood, so you want to put a plug in there or use the toothpicks and Titebond 3, which is putting new wood into an old hole, essentially making it good again. And that way the screw will have something to bite into, and I'll have a surface of Famowood like I should. So I'm going to get that taken care of, and then I'll do the toothpick glue application, and then I can put this thing back together and we'll get it looking better. I have my second seat bench back taken apart. I've sanded it down with 180 grit. It's cedar. I did a test. Post-war Chris Craft red, too dark, too red. Cherry, like I did the interior of the boat. A little redder than I'd like, maybe even too dark, just a hint. Cedar, same as the stock, too brown. So I'm going to go with the cherry and just live with it. I've noticed on the other boat that I saw, another owner has a little bit redder, darker, but there's not much I can do. It's the stock, so I'm going to have to go with that. So I'm going to use the cherry on this just like I did the boat. What I did is I taped the bottom of the slats to the front where your back would rest against. And there are so many holes that I'm not even sure which ones are good. And in my opinion, they're all bad because they're all been worn out with wear and the working of the bench from original design. So I'm going to fill all the backs just to start with a new surface, and then I'm going to put them on the slats in the back, and these go on the back, and they will go in this surface into this surface, and then there'll be a blind fastener under there. And I'm also going to glue those too, so that should give us the working strength we need. So what I did, I just take some Titebond 3, and I've taped the back so it won't go onto my work surface. Hopefully it'll stay in the hole. And I just filled all the little holes as much as I can with Titebond 3, trying to be neat. Some of these are just huge. Might have several pieces of dowel. And I take the dowel, most of them fit in this hole, and I just put them in there, clip them with my tin snips, and if they need 2, great. If they need 3, we're good. And I'll go ahead and fill that hole. What that will give me is some wood to work with, and it's been glued in with waterproof glue. Then I'll just go ahead and wait for these to dry overnight, and then I will come in with my probably a Japanese pull saw, just cut them off like a plug, and because this is where the slat is going to overlap, you won't see it, so I don't have to be real careful with scratching it. This will get lots of glue, and we'll have those ready to go, and then I'll glue it all together, fasten it with appropriate fasteners, some bronze from the back, and then I'll figure out what holes I want to keep, and I will fill everything I will do the same treatment on the back with these other ones I don't use. Then I'll fill it in with Famowood-Mahogany, put it together, and it'll be ready to go. And then I'll do my staining and stuff, and then have it ready to go. So the glue and screw process went well. We've got lots of glue, a little bit of squeeze out. Tape kind of helped keep that under control. I was kind of conservative. I didn't want a lot of cleanup. There's a bevel on each of these, so there's obviously more surface. There's less surface than it looks like. So that will now sit overnight with Titebond 3 in the joint. I re-drilled the holes. Most likely we're in the holes that they originally were in. That's how it lined up anyway. And but there's new wood in there and glue, so that'll be a lot better bond than when I found it. So this is all lined up. I'm gonna let it sit, and then in the morning or the next day, I will go ahead and fill the hole fastener holes that I did not use. There were obviously way too many, so I'm going to go ahead and fill those ones that I used, and then the ones obviously that weren't, I will go ahead and put a glue and dowel in there to kind of fill some of that void, and then tomorrow when I go to do the Famowood, it'll have a lot more to sit on. So I'm going to call that part done until I get to the Famowood, and then sand and stain. After my dowel and glue into these old fastener hole, and some of them didn't even have fasteners and they were drilled, not used, and then Famowood at the factory, I believe. I went ahead and sanded those down with 180 grit just to get them flush. And then I go back with a countersink to give that hole some depth, like there's a fastener in there. It gets the loose glue out of the top, and you don't want that little dowel showing because it looks terrible. So I go in there and I just put it right in the middle of the old fastener hole, and I take it down, a 1/16 or an 1/8. And so now when I put the Famowood on, it'll give that fastener hole a uniform look all the way through, and you won't see that dowel popping up. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish that, and then I can go ahead and I just put my Famowood on and let her dry, and then sand it back, and then I'll give this whole thing a final sand. I've got a little blood on here from my fingers. I'll get that out of there, and then I'll go ahead and I'll put that cherry gel stain from Old Masters on, and we'll have this ready. I'm gonna just go ahead and put clear epoxy sealer on like the rest of the inside of the boat head, and it'll be uniform, and we'll just go ahead and varnish it up like the rest of the boat. That'll wrap up today's episode. The next step will be for me to apply the stain and the epoxy coating and then the varnish to all of those parts except for the two floorboards, which will get the gray bilge paint like the bilge. So thank you for tuning in. If you're enjoying the series, please hit the subscribe button so you're getting alerts when they're coming out, which are every 2 weeks. And if you're enjoying it, please hit the like button. It's always nice to receive encouragement from you, the viewers. And if you have any questions or comments, please place those below in the comment section. It's always nice to hear your questions or see your comments. It's always good to talk about how we do things. And I will see you in 2 weeks. Thank you for tuning in.